We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is June 15th, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as the next day on Stitcher. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and of violence. And we are, of course, happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone. Phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can contact us via Skype. Skype username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about. And check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to our Facebook and social media info, as well as other information, including articles, blogs, pictures, and things like that. I will be posting the fourth part of our series on the legalization of drugs and why they should be treated as they were prior to the 1920s after the show, so you can go check that out. And we also have any of the information you missed, the phone number, the Skype username is all there as well. So you can, if you forget that information, you can always go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com to get all of that contact information, including the email address if you want to send us an email. So yesterday I talked mostly the whole show about what happened in Orlando. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to spend a few minutes on what they're already talking about doing. And of course, this has been 4 days, the third business day. They're already talking about making changes to gun control. I guess that wouldn't be proper English. That they're already talking about making changes, writing new gun bills or gun legislation. You had a congressman that came out and said, oh, we need to have updates to the Second Amendment like we do the First, and that this is all about guns, not about terrorism or hate crimes or anything like that, which is nice. Of course, the candidates for president have what they plan to do. Clinton talked about a task force on lone wolf terrorism. Trump, even before this happened, made various speeches on about more security. You know, who cares about that First Amendment was one of the things that he had said. More spying, less rights. Essentially, that's where I don't understand why anyone would support Trump, because everything he has said has been totally anti-freedom. Of course, everything's rigged anyway, so what does it really matter? But all of the statements that he has made nothing, maybe he made a statement here or there, but for the majority of his statements, at least during the primaries or before everybody left and during the debates and all of the things he had said there, because that's when I paid attention in his town halls and during the debates, those were the type of things he was saying. So he is also talking about, this terrorist watch list and how you can be on the terrorist watch list and get a gun. Yeah, because there's no due process. You could put anybody. And that includes, what people aren't thinking about is they're just thinking, just Muslim terrorists would be on there. No, they're going to put people, they could put me on there for doing a show. Like the show I do, I could be on there. I seriously doubt it because my show's so small. But if I got bigger, I could end up on a terrorist watch list and not be able to get another gun. So this whole thing, when it comes down to it, and I said this yesterday, everybody's looking for, what do we do? What do we do? How do we stop these lone wolf terrorists? The bottom line is you can't. You cannot live in a free country, which we don't anyway, so what's the fucking difference? But you cannot live in a free society and stop people from doing random acts of anything. Violence, robbery, murder. You just can't. They want pre-crime is what they want. And to have something like that, you have to totally violate people's rights, which they're already doing already, but that's not good enough. So they're already on top of this. And as I said yesterday, this is a wet dream for politicians because, look, it gives them another example to use, to exploit, and to go after guns, terrorists, and attacks on minorities. Or, yeah, because gay people would be a minority. It's not a race, but it's still a minority. And not that I have anything against gay people or anything like that, because I don't. It just happened to be gay people that he went after. But it doesn't represent the majority of people's attitudes towards gay people at all, because most people don't give a shit, meaning that, if somebody's gay, somebody's gay. Who cares? That's their business. So that's really all I wanted to say about it. They're trying to fast track the 1 million Syrian refugees that they're letting into the country. I personally, I don't like the fact about getting permission from the government to come into a country. However, I can see people's points on this, on letting 1 million Syrian fucking refugees into the country and letting more and more Muslim refugees into the country and trying to actually change the culture to an extent. And if it's between changing gun laws and letting in 1 million refugees, I'd rather keep the gun laws the way they are and not let in the refugees. I had to think about the order of that. So, I mean, in an ideal world, I think you should be able to travel wherever the fuck you want. And who owns, if it's public land, you should be able to go wherever you want. But I understand something like this where they're saying, not only are they letting them in, but they're paying for it, and that's an issue. So you don't pay to let people into the country, as far as I'm concerned, nor do you give them welfare. If people can come and go to get wherever they're trying to get or go where they want to go, that's totally on them. But giving them money and helping them to get somewhere, that's a whole nother story. So that's really all I got to say about that as of right now. We'll see what happens with the gun laws and if anything changes, because just because some idiot congressman or a few idiot congressmen come out and say some shit, it didn't happen last time when they tried to just pass a bill that I think it was just background checks, and that didn't pass. And that was when the Democrats held the Senate as well, and it still didn't pass. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure they're going to be doing a lot of things that we're not going to be told about. It's just between the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, they're going to be doing shit that we don't know about, violating our rights even more. So, but I don't know. It's just going to continue, essentially. The level of freedom that you have, which isn't much anymore, period, is going to continue to disintegrate until government totally controls your life. And that's what's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's where everything is leading. And they want to get the guns, of course, first, because it's a lot easier to take over when no one's armed. So, I was talking yesterday about drawing lines, and that's definitely where I draw a line. As Charlton Heston said, you'll be prying my gun out of my cold, dead hands. Anyway, that is not why we are here today. We have two main stories that I wanted to talk about. One very disturbing that actually originally happened in March, but it had come up again, and it almost seems like, according to the witness, it was an execution. So there, in Arizona, and I think there's a lot of them, there's an Indian reservation, because I dated a couple girls that were Native Americans, and they were between New Mexico and Arizona, meaning they lived in, I think they were born in Arizona, and they lived on a reservation. They're Navajos. And then they lived in New Mexico, and I think they lived on the reservation there. I believe this woman was a Navajo as well. But she was 27 years old, a mother, had a 9-year-old. Now, she had some issues. Her name was Loreal. It's hard to pronounce her last name. Tsingine. Now, this girl was 5 feet, 100 pounds. Now, keep that in mind, and I'll bring it up again because it makes a lot of difference in this story. And in about the past year, she had some issues. What it sounds like is that she was drinking too much. I guess she could have been doing other stuff, but it sounds like she had some issues with alcohol in the past year. I don't know. Maybe some things have happened. She's only 27. It's not like she's, which to people that are younger than 27 is, oh, that's old. But 27 is really young. So, I don't know what she was going through, but she, I don't know, maybe she broke up with her boyfriend or something. She had a couple incidences. On the day in question, she reportedly went into, I believe it was like some kind of convenience store or something like that, and just put shit in her purse, but it made it obvious, and I guess she just started eating a hot dog or something. I mean, it sounded like she was really fucked up, and I guess she was there earlier in the day, and she grabbed some beer, and so they called the police, which that's fine. Although it's scary anytime you call the police in any situation, because a lot of times people end up dead, and that's what happened in this story. So I want to play this witness's account of what happened, because the police claim she was armed with scissors. Now, again, 2 cops, 5 feet tall, 100-pound woman who was drunk, supposedly armed with scissors. Everything I read and looked at, there's no proof that she actually even had scissors. And if she had scissors, there's a lot of variations of scissors. I would think if she had scissors, she had small little scissors that you use like to something a woman would use scissors for, cut your eyebrows or something. I don't know. Something to that effect. Not like a big fucking thing, scissors that are like a foot long or something like that. But here is a witness that was actually there, who witnessed the police, who, through what I got from him, was that they had her on the ground and they were handcuffing her, and another cop came over and just shot her 5 times. So what it sounded like to me is that she was on the ground being handcuffed and was just shot 5 times by this officer who has been in trouble a lot. I have his name somewhere. This officer, I think it's Shipley. So he had been in trouble, and I have some reports a bunch of times. And there had been comments made by other officers that he should have never been an officer. He should have never passed a test. All of those things. So she wasn't innocent, and as far as, yes, she did shoplift, but she didn't do anything serious. And I guess the last thing she had done was she grabbed 2 6-packs of beer and ran out. And she didn't even seem to be in a hurry to leave, and they just called the police, and the witnesses, saw her and the cop, and that her whole body flew over him and was slammed into the concrete, and that the officer Shipley is the one who shot him. That the witness thought he was putting cuffs on him, but of course he starts screaming, "Stop resisting!" And he said it got real loud. That's what they do. They stop resisting, which he probably wasn't doing anything. And then he pulled out his gun and shot her 5 times. It sounds to me totally like an execution. Is what it sounds like. We'll play the witness testimony, not testimony because it wasn't in court, but the witness interview who saw what had happened. Let me I forgot to stop the original music, so let me rewind this.
I seen the officer exit his vehicle, and he grabbed her by her wrists, and I seen her body go over his body.
And remember that this is for shoplifting. Now, I'm not saying it's okay to shoplift, because it's not. You're stealing from a store. I guess it was a Circle K, so it was a gas station. And obviously you're stealing from somebody. It is a crime. But it's a crime that, you know, to me, the penalty should be you pay a fine to really what the real penalty should be, even though the injustice system in this country is so fucked up, is whatever she stole, she should have to pay for. And there you go. She should have to reimburse them for what she stole and maybe a little extra or something like that. And that really should be it. Now, she probably, because there was another incident that was similar that she had with a cop. I don't know if it was shoplifting though, where she got in a physical altercation with a cop. That cop, of course, handled it how he should have. He didn't pull out a gun. He wrestled her to the ground, handcuffed her, and brought her to jail, because obviously a 5-foot, 100-pound woman is pretty easy, if you're a cop, to get to the ground. Yeah, I know, you know, maybe girls with heels on or something like that, it might be a little hard. But if you're supposed to be a trained police officer and you're facing an unarmed 5-foot, 100-pound drunk woman, you should be able to easily subdue her. So we'll go back to this witness's recollection of what happened.
Because he grabbed her by the wrist like that, and I don't know why he did that, but her whole body flew over and slammed into the concrete. So when that's happening, I'm saying, look, that's gonna be it. She's gonna be arrested. But no, he put his knee behind her, and I thought that was gonna be it, because he still had her by the wrist. So he had both her arms right there. That should have been it. She could have been took her into custody right there. She could have been arrested, but that didn't happen. The officer started screaming, "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" And it got louder. It got real loud. He said, "Stop resisting!" He started screaming it, and I thought that she was gonna get tased. That's what I thought was gonna happen. But no, he stepped back, not too far from her. See, and there was this big old light pole right there, and another telephone pole, and the cop cars right here. And then that's when that SUV, the police officer that was inside of Circle K, the one in the short pants with the cap on, he's the one that was driving that SUV. So he pulls up and he gets out, and all I see him do is he went back real slow like that, and he went for his gun. And I thought it was his taser, but it wasn't. It was a rapid fire, 5 times. Boom, 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 boom. And I was like, whoa. Cameron dropped his chips. He was eating his chips.
That was, I guess he was with his 17-year-old son at the time.
He dropped his chips, and he was just looking at me. He's all, I think that wasn't supposed to happen, he told me. I said, no, just stay right here. Stay right here. I'll be back. So I started speeding up my pace because I could just see her twitching and just moving, and she was like gasping because she was like trying to breathe.
And that's an eyewitness account of what had happened there, which sounds like an execution. And again, this is the Winslow Police. This was Officer Bailey, I believe his name was. Let me get the name correct again. I believe it was Shipley, sorry. Officer Shipley, who shot her 5 times. And a lot of people were saying, like, about the 5 times. I'm saying about the at all. And there was no mention by him about scissors. And even if she had, let's say she had scissors, okay? They had her down. This other officer had flipped her over, basically slammed her to the ground, and had her hands. And even if she had scissors in her hands, let's say, which again, he didn't mention, so what? So if she was able to somehow, cut his hand with scissors, you're a fucking cop, man. That's your job. So you get cut with fucking scissors. It's not going to kill you, okay? But instead, they thought that it would be a better thing to just murder this woman, 27 years old, 9-year-old daughter, who, again, I think she was arrested. It was either 1 or 2 other times in the past year, but I believe it was just from what I read, the past year that she just had some issues, and it sounds like she was just drinking too much, and maybe she was going through something. And that happens to a lot of people, that they have periods in their life that they may be going through things. And if the worst thing you're doing when you're going through things is shoplifting, it's not like, it's one thing if you're going through things and you're beating people or shooting people or doing something, real serious crimes. Shoplifting is not that serious of a crime, especially when you're shoplifting from a Circle K where the total value of what she took was probably like $20. It's not like she was shoplifting from an electronics store taking thousands of dollars worth of merchandise or something. So you have a 27-year-old woman dead, and not that, this sounds kind of shallow. They showed pictures of her, and of course she was very pretty as well. And, 27, she had her whole life ahead of her, and they're showing a picture of the Circle K. And this was from the Wilmington Police Department, or Winslow, I'm sorry, the Winslow Police Department in Arizona. And we sit there, not we being we, but society in general, and they have this story of these people getting shot, which is important. A bunch of people got killed, but it's not something that's an epidemic. It's not, shit like this with what happened to this woman happens all the time. And you didn't hear anything about this on CNN or Fox or any of these 24-hour news stations. it was surprisingly enough in the New York Daily News. Now, and the only reason I think it was is because and I believe she was a Navajo, as I had said, that the Navajo Nation, yeah, she was, that the Navajo Nation actually made a big deal out of this. And that's what got the attention of the New York Daily News. But most people that get killed by the police in situations like this, or even worse, situations where they didn't even do anything. I mean, yes, she did do something, but there's no comparison to what she did and what the end result was. But of course, the New York Daily News assumes that she had scissors. And I was thinking about this today, even the story in Orlando. How do we know anything, really? We get news. A lot of people get it from what I call government media, or you get it from the internet and you try to find as many sources as possible, but you don't know who's getting, just regurgitating another source in their article. And what's true and what's not. And just because a lot of times in cases that involve police, the information comes directly from the police. So just because the police says something really should be taken with a grain of salt. It's meaningless. Their credibility, the amount of times they lie, I mean, they're worse than government media, really. Or just as bad. But no, people take what they say as gospel, and it doesn't say anything about scissors being recovered. It just, the Daily News says, oh, well, the police said, essentially what they're saying, because they're total government media, is that, well, the police said she had scissors, so she had scissors. So it's the news cycle, and I think a lot of people realize there's obviously big problems with it. Some people don't even pay attention to it because they don't know what to fucking believe. And I don't know what to believe neither. I go through as much as I can when I'm going to talk about a story, because I want to try to validate things as much as I can. And then, of course, I'll watch government media to see what they say about something. So then, essentially, I can attack it for the most part, or come to a conclusion based on what they're saying. Just like with what they were saying about Orlando, and then coming to the conclusion, okay, now they're going to pass gun laws, now they're going to do this, now they're going to do that, or they're going to attempt to at least. So I think the only reason why this made it to the New York Daily News is because the Navajo Nation really made a big deal about this, which I'm glad that they did, because otherwise people that wouldn't have heard about it probably did, but they probably didn't give a fuck, because what a lot of people will say is, especially the way it's worded, the caption is, Arizona police officer who fatally shot Navajo woman armed only with scissors raised major concerns while trainee, including being too quick with gun. Well, that actually is kind of good, except for the scissors part. But it talks about, and I'll play the clips I have, but it talks about how they were concerned about this officer, Austin Shipley, and that when he was a trainee, it says that, and this is directly from the article, Shipley's performance as a trainee was so spotty he should never have earned a spot on the Winslow Police Department, at least one officer said. A day before Shipley's training ended in 2013, a police corporal recommended that the department not retain him, according to records obtained by the Associated Press. And it gets worse than that as far as him being written up and those type of things. It also says at least 2 officers who trained Shipley said he was too quick to go for his weapon. If this behavior continues, it's going to get someone hurt, Captain Ron Chisholm wrote. So it's just it's crazy because, you know, listening to the account of that witness, it sounds like a straight up execution. It really does. So, you know, I can understand why people would be outraged over this. But what's even worse is that stuff like this happens all the time. And that was my only comparison to the Orlando shooting, that is an isolated incident. I know they want to make it out like, well, because of the other guy who went to work and shot some of his coworkers. And you look at within like a year or less than a year time period, there were 2 shootings that were ISIS inspired, quote unquote. But then from 9/11 to that original shooting in San Bernardino, what happened? Well, the Boston bombing, which I believe was totally a false flag anyway. And if you follow a lot of the information, even the stuff that they recently released, and a lot of it they had blacked out, some other things came to light as well. There's just no doubt in my mind that wasn't a CIA or, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the CIA. It could be the FBI. I don't know. I'm not an expert in government agencies and who's doing what, although I do know the CIA is not supposed to operate within the United States, but they do it anyway. So there's no doubt in my mind, though, that they didn't do that. And the point, again, that I keep bringing up, and this is just one part of, there are so many reasons. And it's funny because this is sad in a way, yet funny, but not that kind of funny, because I used to live in Boston. So, of course, when that happened, you know, I saw all these posts, and I even got unfriended by some people because they got so offended by me saying that they weren't the ones who did it. And thinking about that, you know, if I would have went on Facebook and said, you know, who cares about those people, or I'm glad this happened, or something like that, I can understand people obviously getting mad. But to get mad because the people that the police claim did it, I'm saying, no, I believe the government did it. And I have all this evidence that I'm going to list out as to why I think that. I don't know if I'd call it evidence, but these ideas as to why I come to that conclusion. Why would that get you mad? You know, and I think it's really fear that, one, the government would do something like that, and two, that the people that are ultimately responsible are sitting somewhere in Washington or in Boston doing the same jobs they did prior to that, or maybe they even got promoted. So the one thing, though, that when I don't have a lot of time to go into it, that I always bring up is the fact that they said they had video of the younger brother putting the bag down. Nobody has seen this fucking video, not even the governor of Massachusetts. It's just what the FBI told him. And that's just one thing, though. I mean, I wouldn't just take that alone and say, okay, well, that's proof. That means they didn't do it, because that's just one item. There's so many. But, you know, you got the guy who was killed in Orlando by the FBI. I mean, there's just so much that was related to the case. There's just so much that points to them most likely being operatives for the FBI or the CIA and spying on Muslims. So it's fucked up. But in this case, of course, it's sad. And what I was saying, again, in comparison to Orlando, of course, a lot more people got killed. But the difference is that this happens every day. And there's multiple people getting shot and killed by police every day. Now, I would say that some of those people, if they're firing upon police and police fire back, okay, that's fine. That's justifiable. But what I'm saying is that situations like this happen once a day, at least. I mean, this is an epidemic. What's going on with what happened in Orlando is not. But that's what they got to find a solution to that. What about a solution to this? No, they forgot all about the police killing people and police violence and all that. No, they basically did nothing. Some departments got body cameras, and that's about it. And then they basically did nothing. They wanted to federalize the police, which they've pretty much been doing anyway. You might as well consider the police federalized, and they've been federalized probably for 5+ years at least. I mean, not officially, but all the training and the weapons and all the things that come through the federal government and the federal government's involvement. And I've talked about the federal government's involvement in cities. Like, for example, I've talked about here in Las Vegas and Clark County, how much money they get from the federal government, all the grants, and how to get the money for the grants, they have to meet all these specifications. And this is for things like housing. HUD is very involved in county budgets, which is pretty fucked up, but it shows how the federal government is very involved in urban planning in various cities and things that they should not be involved in at all. So there are some more clips that I have regarding this officer who seems like, again, he should have never been hired by the force. So let me play those. And then when we come back, because I have a few, but most of them are pretty short, though. When we come back, we'll talk about the movement to overthrow the government or to fight the government. As the Washington Post put it, primed to fight the government. So be sure to check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Again, immediately following the show, I will post my latest article/blog on the drug war, which has to do with opiates and heroin. So be sure to check that out and check us out on our social media pages and like us on Facebook as well. And I guess everybody that's religious, say a prayer for Loreal Tsingine. And we will be right back after this.
You understand that, you pay consequences for breaking the law, but it shouldn't have to be that extreme.
Only on 12 tonight, the family of a woman that Winslow police shot and killed, they're speaking out. Investigators say Loreal Tsingine struggled during her arrest, had a weapon on her person, and presented a threat to the officer. Charlie Etzedy is back in Winslow tonight with what Loreal's family is saying.
The family of Loreal Tsingine is looking for answers.
We want to know why, how many times she got shot, and why he shot her that many times. We want justice.
DPS confirming a Winslow police officer fired 5 times at Tsingine during an altercation that took her life on Sunday. It's unclear how many times Tsingine was struck by those bullets.
She was so exuberant, charismatic. She was just full of love,
Tsingine grew up in the Titso community on the Navajo Nation and has a 9-year-old daughter. A DPS investigation reveals Tsingine, who, according to her family, was around 5 feet tall and about 100 pounds, was armed with scissors. The Winslow Police Department said the weapon was a substantial threat to the officer and caused him to fire.
Was he so scared of her, a little tiny female with a scissor?
No other details were provided about the altercation that ensued after 2 officers tried to take Tsingine into custody as a suspect for shoplifting at a nearby Circle K.
They didn't have any mercy, no compassion or anything. She's just a small little girl.
The family acknowledged Tsingine had mental health issues but didn't want to go into detail, and also shared Tsingine had troubles in the past but didn't deserve to die the way she did.
We understand that, you pay consequences for breaking the law, but it shouldn't have to be that extreme.
On the Navajo Nation, Charlie Etzedy, 12 News.
To NAZ Today, I'm Sierra Shipley.
And I'm Jennifer Miraval. Thanks for tuning in. An update now on a story that we have been following regarding the Winslow police officer accused of shooting to death a Navajo woman on Easter Sunday this year.
NAZ Today has obtained documents that show at least 2 of Shipley's supervisors have expressed complaints in writing in the past about Shipley's behavior. Some of the issues brought up included Shipley having integrity issues and continually falsifying reports. The documents further say Officer Shipley has issues following orders or directives given to him by his superiors. Officer Shipley fails to control suspects when making an arrest. Officer Shipley has also failed to communicate with other officers on shift when he is out on call for service. Shipley is accused of shooting to death 27-year-old Loreal Tsingine after he got into an altercation with her. He was following her after receiving a call that was shoplifting at a nearby Circle K. Shipley is on paid administrative leave pending an investigation by Department of Public Safety. Now, we also spoke to President Navajo Nation Russell Begay today about the matter.
The city of Winslow, someone within that administration did not do due diligence and even worse than that, ignored all of the signs that people discovered and seen in his act and in his responses, and nothing was done. He remained on the force. He was kept on the force. And so this is something that no city, no town, anywhere should condone.
We start tonight with an update on the Winslow police officer that was involved in the shooting on Easter Sunday. According to reports acquired by NAZ Today, the officer was involved in 2 previous incidents requiring disciplinary in his 3 years in law enforcement.
Officer
Officer Austin Shipley received his first discipline in 2013 when the mother of a 15-year-old girl complained that Shipley harmed her child by throwing the girl against a squad car and making a rude comment to her. And earlier this year, Shipley was put on a one-day suspension followed by 6 months probation for a separate incident of using his stun gun on a teenage girl. In addition to the 2 disciplinary issues, his file also contained 4 letters of commendation. The Department of Public Safety is currently investigating the incident on March 27th that resulted in the death of 27-year-old Loreal Tsingine.
How's it going, guys? How's it going, Mayor, council members? I'm Mr. Rardin, one of your only attorneys in Winslow, Arizona. Went to college for 15 years, have 4 degrees, and one of my pupils is walking away from me right now, who I believe I taught chemistry back in like 1994. And so I used to be one of deputy prosecutors for almost 8 years. And for 4.5 of those years, I worked here in Winslow as a felony charging attorney. I can see that Chief Garnett's here. He was nice enough to let me have an office there for a few years, so I got to understand what was going on in Winslow and be able to better contact the victims that would come into the police department that wanted to speak to a prosecutor, someone that was independent of the police department, to answer their questions. And so the only reason I'm here is because I don't really watch the news very much. I do most reading, and it's usually writings from our founding fathers and so forth. And so I didn't know about the shooting until maybe a couple of weeks ago. And so I just wanted to express a few things about this, things that you can do. One is that if I was a council member and mayor, I would find a new police chief that isn't from the area. I believe that the Winslow Police Department has an atmosphere of corruption. And when I talk about corruption, I'm not talking about corruption as like hiding evidence. I'm talking about corruption about nepotism, about hiring people that you're friendly with, besides hiring someone that's more competent. And when you have that kind of corruption, what you do is that it creates a divided workforce, and you start treating people better that agree with you. They're like sycophants, basically, and that's the way it's run. It's like I would sit there and I would see certain officers get treated miserably because they would have a different opinion than Chief Garnett. That's when he was there. I mean, Chief Garnett wasn't there most of the time. I wouldn't say that he was a great manager of the personnel, but the thing is that he treats people, church members, differently. His secretary was gone all the time. I'm not quite certain if she put down the hours that she was missing. But, I was there, sometimes 2-3 days a week, if not more. She was gone most of the time. But I just wanted to bring to your attention that if I was the city council, I would hire someone from not here. I would hire someone that could come in with independent judgment, didn't have any prejudices, didn't have any favorites, and that's someone that would raise or bring someone up to like a lieutenant or corporal that was deserving besides someone that was a bootlicker. And when I say this, I'm not doing this because I'm proud of this. This is very hard for me to do because I like Chief Garnett. He was very nice to me. I do think that if you cross his path, he can be somewhat vicious. And I like Aaron. I worked with Aaron because he was doing the evidence.com when I got there. That made it much easier for me to do my job. But I wouldn't hire Aaron for the same reason, as I believe that he treats people differently that agree with him. Our founding fathers separated the government into 3 branches for a reason. Coming out of the Victorian era, they knew that you couldn't put power into one source without it being unchecked. I think that's what we have here in Winslow. We don't have justice of the peace that will check the police department because Mr. Little is friends with Mr. Garnett. Mr. Garnett told me that he signed his petition to get on the ballot, which him and I had an argument basically saying that it was kind of uncouth for him to support someone like that, considering that it would be a check on his power. But I don't see there's any check here. And so I could go over and over again. I'm not going to go through every circumstance that I have seen. I'm not going to go through every police report that I have witnessed. I'm not going to go through every victim that has come and talked to me about how they've mistreated. I could sit here all night and do that. I think you only said 5 minutes. But I think it's my moral duty to come here and basically tell you that I think that someone outside the police department would be a better choice. The other thing, too, is that it's come to my attention that someone wants a civil force to look into this. I think that would be a good idea. I'm still an attorney, but I'm not a practicing attorney anymore. We'll just say that my main love is the science field, and so now I'm doing medical device regulation. But I do cases pro bono. Last year I did over 250 hours of pro bono work. You would be surprised how many people come to me and tell me how they've been mistreated by the police department, about how they've been mistreated by the JP. And usually it comes into the fact that the JP is using workforce harassment 500 yards or 500 feet around a workplace to keep transients out, which is a problem because really it's only supposed to be dedicated to the workplace. You can't expand it beyond that. I take cases every now and then. I don't know if you guys knew that, but the little 15-year-old that was charged, I took that case. He hasn't been charged since. And I can say that through my investigation, Mr. Garnett decided to arrest my 15-year-old client after he was told by the county attorney's office there wasn't enough evidence, which is a 1983 violation of his constitutional rights. You can't arrest someone after the prosecutor tells you there's not enough there. And so that would be a circumstance. And so I would ask or suggest that a counsel wouldn't be bad. I would volunteer for it if you would want me to. But I do think that there needs to be something else there because I have a feeling in the long run, just by people talking to me, they'll start taking matters into their own hands. And when I talk about taking matters into their own hands, I think it would be legal matters that you guys would be looking at. And then the last thing, I listened to last week's meeting. I believe, I can't remember the leads, the Nistago got up and you guys were talking about the alcohol. From my experience, the only thing that Winslow could do, even if you got rid of every liquor license here, it would have unintended consequences. You would have people driving to Holbrook, or you'd have people driving over to Flagstaff. You'd probably have more accidents because of people doing this, driving drunk. The other thing is that you're not really going to make headway, or at least the Navajo Nation's not going to make any headway unless they start taking responsibility for putting people in jail. Now, I know they can only do it for a year, and I've talked to some of their judges, and they only have a certain amount of beds. But no matter what you do, they're going to find it, and they're going to take it on to the nation. And at that point, what's going to happen is you're going to have unintended consequences and more accidents. Unless the Navajo Nation starts to arrest the people and take matters into their own hands, I don't see it stopping. The only thing that Winslow could do is basically enforce the liquor laws that selling to minors or selling to someone who is inebriated. The other thing that I had seen is that a lot of defendants would tell me that people such that living at Maverick would sell this stuff out the back door. I don't know what you would do on that, but I had seen that before.
You are listening to Nonpartisan Liberty for All Radio with your host, Dave Bourne. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in, username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Check us out there. We have archives, articles. In fact, as I had mentioned, I'm going to post another part of the series that I'm writing regarding the legalization of drugs and the drug war, and why drugs should be legal like they were in prior to the 1920s. So look for that later tonight. Really, I guess, to sum up this case, this is nothing new. This, to me, is a straight up fucking execution. And until the only solution, and this, of course, will never happen, to this issue of police killing people, violating their rights, beating people, whatever it may be, when it comes to the police is to get rid of the police. And I have a Facebook page, and the government police. And really, it's to take the power away that the police have. We don't need police that have power that regular people don't. Now, I know most people, because the way they grew up and that's what they're used to. And of course, well, what if this and what if that? I guarantee you I would get a whole bunch of what ifs. Although I could go the other way and provide, well, what if somebody gets killed by the police? Because they get killed all the time and nothing happens. Well, that's just something you have to live with. Well, I'd rather live with the people not get killed by the police and not have them, and have something like private security companies. You have a monopoly on force. That's what the police are, a monopoly on force. The police don't have any incentive to get better, to do the right thing, to provide better customer service, because they're not going anywhere. There's not going to be another service or another company that's going to take them over. It's not like if McDonald's treats you like shit, you can go across the street to Burger King. And that's the problem with government. One of the many problems, but that's one of the big problems with government, is you don't have another option. And the main point of having police, which they don't even do, they get there after the fact, but it's to protect people and keep them safe. That's the point of police. And they don't even do that. Their job is to fill the jails and collect as much money as possible, and to treat people like shit and let them know that they're in charge, and to keep people down and let them know that they have to be obedient to the government and the police and the society that they're in. So that's really all. I've said all this stuff before, so that's really all I have to say about that. And it will continue until the power that the police have is taken away. And no one's, I mean, politicians rarely talk about doing anything when it comes to police, never mind, taking power away from them. So I don't see that happening. Of course, I don't see anything happening through the system that any changes, or if you want freedom, any type of freedom, really, because the amount of freedom that there is now is slowly diminishing, and the level of freedom keeps going down and down, is not through the government. Now, what I'm going to talk about next actually addresses that, sort of. And I say sort of because I don't totally agree with the ideology, or a lot of the ideology of these groups. However, their philosophy of defending themselves against the government, I do agree with. So there was an article in the Washington Post, it's been a little less than a month, almost a month, about what was the title of the actual article? It was "Primed to Fight the Government, a fast-growing U.S. movement armed with guns and the Constitution sees a dire threat to liberty." And I think anybody who has any fucking common sense that is obvious that there is a threat to liberty. There's not just a threat to liberty. Liberty has been almost eliminated. So they talk about a group in Oregon, the Central Oregon Constitutional Guard. They have about 30 members. They go out and practice shooting, and they say that the intent is to be able to work together and defend ourselves if we need to. They also collect things. Well, I wouldn't say collect, but practice or stockpile supplies. Not collect supplies, but stockpile supplies, practice survival skills, infantry tactics, and things along those lines. So they say that it doesn't say in the Constitution that you can't stand up and defend yourself. And of course, you have the Constitution, as far as I'm concerned, is irrelevant when it comes to the right to defend yourself. You have the right to defend yourself against anybody, whether it's a fucking government agent or not. Don't forget that the government is based on one concept, and that's the concept of violence, that they have enough guns and enough people to force you to succumb to their will, essentially. In the article, law enforcement, this is directly from the article, law enforcement officials and the watchdog groups like the Southern Poverty Law Center, which always seems to come up, and Mark Potok, that motherfucker. I can't stand him, but he's a terrorist himself, because he is trying to push his own agenda, which is an agenda of the other side, a progressive agenda, that you can't come out and defend yourself or speak out against the government and things like that. But anyway, it says law enforcement officials and the watchdog groups that track the self-styled patriot groups call them anti-government extremists, militias, armed militants, and even domestic terrorists. Some opponents of the largely white and rural groups have made fun by calling them Al-Qaeda and vanilla ISIS. It's nice that they had to put that in, that they're mostly rural groups, and make fun of them to kind of push anybody that agrees with them or agrees with some of their ideas, to kind of push them away, just like they lump certain groups together to push people away, or how Republicans use freedom and liberty all the time. And then when people think of freedom and liberty, they think of Republicans and not the actual what freedom and liberty truly mean. It also mentions, as I said, Mark Potok, which monitors extremism, and he makes his, the statement he's been making for years now, that in 2008 there were 150 groups, now there are 1,000, and that's because there's a black president, which is bullshit. I'm not saying that maybe a few of these groups are racist. Obviously, racism still exists, but a lot of it has to do with the policies of Obama, especially in the past couple years going after guns. That definitely has made a difference. And they mention the 1990s Ruby Ridge, Waco, and the Oklahoma City bombing, which is another, I believe, false flag, or at least it didn't go down the way it did. And I would recommend that. And I talked to somebody who was actually kind of close to that whole thing. I would recommend that you watch A Noble Lie, and you can even watch it on YouTube. And there's just a lot of stuff that just doesn't make any sense. But they're calling this the second wave that is going on, especially in the West. And it got a huge boost from what happened at the Bundy Ranch. And then, of course, there was what happened in Oregon. So I agree with this group to an extent. I didn't realize this article was so long. I didn't read I thought it ended because it had pictures in there, and I thought it ended at that picture. But I agree with self-defense and non-compliance because, as I've said, there's not going to be a solution that involves government or this fucked up system. There's just not. If you want to see any type of freedom or an increase in freedom, because there's not going to be an increase in freedom, that's done with. As far as I see. I mean, you may see some state laws like we did happen to see in Nevada, you don't have to register your handguns anymore. So that was a small increase in freedom. So you might see it in a state law. You're not going to see it on a federal level. I don't believe that you are. And if you do, it's only because they passed some really fucked up law like they were going to remove part of the Patriot Act, which they didn't even do anyway, you know? So in general, you're not going to see any major increase, I think, in freedom on a federal level. And there has been, of course, you know, with marijuana, I would see that as definitely something that increased freedom. But again, that's on a state level. And every time they do something, you know, never mind all the regulations, all the money that you have to pay to open your own place, but they always seem to, it's like if there's an increase in freedom, they got to balance it out and then go after something else like prescription painkillers or another drug or something. So in general, what I'm saying is that, yes, there could be things here or there, but in general, there's not going to be an increase in freedom through legislation, through the federal government. So if we want to see that, and I'm talking about what I consider as true freedom and liberty, and that's where we may differ. Now, one, I don't support any war with the government or anything like that. That's one of the biggest things. And I don't know that they do neither. I listen to some of the clips that I play, and it's more about self-defense, which I'm totally on board with. But it's, you know, the same thing, you're drawing that line. But as far as any aggression or anything preemptive or anything like that, I don't support any of that. I don't. And in general, I wouldn't want to see anybody get hurt. But what happens, I guess. I mean, if it comes down to my life or somebody else's and I have to defend myself, then I have to defend myself. So in general, I'm not somebody who, you have these guys in the military, some of them that, I mean, they get off on some of this shit. Like, they're like, yeah, let's go out and kill some fucking Muslims or whatever. And they enjoy it, which I think is a little sick, but it is what it is. I wouldn't, and I've said this before, if somebody even broke in my house and I had to kill them, I would feel bad about it. Now, I wouldn't feel in the wrong because I wouldn't be, but I would feel bad about the fact that I would have had to kill them and that I would consider it an unfortunate incident. But at the same time, people need to defend themselves, and the government, really, their only authority, again, is based on the fact that they have a huge military, they have huge police forces, they have all these weapons, and that's where their authority comes from, because they don't recognize what I would say are natural rights. And you can call them natural rights, you can call them God-given rights, you can call them whatever. Now, these groups, and that would be, the right to defend yourself, basically anything as long as you don't hurt somebody else or their property, the right to put what you want in your body. I don't know how these groups feel about drugs, if they believe in the right for people to do drugs. These militia groups, at least this one that we're talking about, the Central Oregon Constitutional Guard, and I need to read more of this article because I thought I had read the whole thing. They are they're constitutionalists, and I am not, for many reasons. One, and I realized that they were writing a lot of this stuff down, not because they believed your rights came from the government, just to try to protect them. However, the Constitution does not give you freedom. It does not protect your freedom. It's a fucking piece of paper. It doesn't do anything. And I don't believe in a government, period. So to be a, constitutionalist, although I agree with them on probably a lot of the ideas that they may have, I don't agree with them on that. And that's a major thing. Also, I don't support the military, nor do I support the police. And a lot of these militias are very pro-military. And or even former military. Now, just because somebody's former military, I don't hold anything against them. It depends what they've learned while they've been in the military. And I feel bad, and I've talked about it before, for some of these people that are talked in during high school to join the military, and, oh yeah, we're going to give you this and money for college and whatever, and it's not anything like what they thought it was going to be, and they get totally fucked over. And I feel bad for these people. I would say that they're sort of going in the right direction, although the leader, I guess, or whoever's speaking for this group, when he says, when people call him anti-government, he says he's not anti-government. He just wants it to follow the Constitution. I'm anti-government, and I just straight up, because this is the thing that always comes up when anybody calls themselves a constitutionalist or says, I want to follow the Constitution. Well, what version of the Constitution do you want to follow, number one? How do you interpret certain parts of the Constitution that other people would argue with you and say, no, this means this? That, of course, comes up, like the Ninth Amendment, which they tried to bury, essentially. You have those type of issues. What version, what amendments would you keep? So you have that, first of all, that people may even differ within the Constitution that they want to follow or think people should follow, because they might say, well, I want the original Constitution. Well, the original Constitution, had slavery, had women couldn't vote, and those type of things. So would you go through and mark out maybe a couple of amendments? Would you keep it how it is now? And on the, a lot of people, of course, debate the Second Amendment. Now, I'm sure they believe that the Second Amendment is a right of the people to bear arms. But do you believe there are any limits on that? Because I don't. I don't believe there's any limits on it, not because of what it says in the Constitution. I don't believe there's any limits on defending yourself. So, as I said yesterday, if somebody's a felon, I still think they have a right to own a gun. I think anybody has a right to own a gun. And I think they have a right to own a gun without showing any fucking information or any of that they should be able to walk into a store and buy a fucking gun. Just like I believe they should be able to do that with drugs. Now, some of these groups are, and I hate using the word racist because people throw that around, and they throw it around when it shouldn't be thrown around. There's people that just explore certain topics and they're labeled as racist. But there was one clip of this guy who, talks about Jews and talks about, and I am half Jewish, not that I consider myself affiliated with any type of race anyway, or any of that shit bothers me. But in general, real racist, not, the bullshit that people just want to, call people racist or anti-Semitic people, or, the majority of these people get labeled racist, which is fucked up, because if you refer to states' rights, oh, well, they did that in the Civil War, so that's racist. It's ridiculous in some of these conversations to bring up racism because you believe in states' rights. It doesn't mean that you believe what happened in a particular point in U.S. history means. It has nothing to do with it. But one of these guys was talking about, the Jews run the world and that whole bullshit. And those are the people I want to stay away from and that I don't agree with. But the majority of the militias are not at all racist. They are just trying to fight for what they believe freedom is, which to them is the Constitution. Now, I just don't agree with them. that the Constitution protects your freedom, or even if you implemented the Constitution and people followed it, it's still not true freedom and liberty to me. It's just not. It doesn't go far enough. So I'm going to play a few clips here. And I do have that clip of the guy talking about Jews as well. And I'll probably play that last. But if I have time to play it, because that was the guy where, you know, he starts to get into some shit like you can tell where he's going and where he wants to go. And I right away deleted it. I'm like, I'm not going to play this clip. But then I kept it as an example. However, again, I don't think the majority of these groups are racist or discriminate at all. I think they really do believe in what they define as freedom, and that's what they're trying to do. So, and like I said, I do agree with them in some areas, and I agree with the fact that they're the self-defense part. Now, how they expect to implement the Constitution as it is pretty much ignored at this point in various aspects, it's not going to happen through the system. So, you know, and these people are not actually coming out and saying, hey, we're going to go to war with the government or anything like that. Now, if it gets to a certain point, I think that's what they're preparing for, that if it gets so far that there is no freedom at all, that maybe that's a possibility. Now, again, I don't believe in going to war with the government or overthrowing the government or anything like that, because you're going to get the same thing. I believe in non-compliance, not complying with the stupid laws, and defending yourself and getting just convincing people, and not even really convincing, I wouldn't even use as the correct word. I would say just getting the truth out and getting people's hearts and minds, you know, because the truth is on our side, really. Well, at least on my side. With them, I don't know about that, but the whole fact of what the government is doing. So some of the stuff, I guess I would say it's on their side as well. And it all depends what you want. You know, some people don't want to live in actual freedom. So we'll play these clips and then we'll be right back. nonpartisanlibertyforall.com. Again, check out the website. And also every Monday, 7:00 p.m., check out the Illumination Hour with host Ellen Stallone. And she brings you a very creative and interesting and entertaining show. So if you haven't checked it out, you can check out the archives on Spreaker, or you can listen to the live airing of the third episode this Monday. But if you want to listen to the old episodes, you can listen via Spreaker, as well as SoundCloud and YouTube. So we'll be right back after this. Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Well, true to form, the Washington Post is now smearing Americans who support the Constitution as white racists. Yes, Kevin Sullivan over at the Washington Post. This is his article. He's basically stating, and he goes into great detail about this militia movement, this defensive movement. He writes, "It's deep in the heart of a vast U.S. military training ground surrounded by spent shotgun shells and juniper trees blasted to shreds. The Central Oregon Constitutional Guard was conducting its weekly firearms training." Nothing wrong with that, right? He writes, quote, "The intent is to be able to work together and defend ourselves if we need to," said B.J. Soper, who's 40 years old. He's a building contractor, who's the emerging leader in a growing national movement rooted in distrust of the federal government, one that increasingly finds itself in armed conflicts with authorities. Now, I can't recall armed conflicts. They must be speaking about the Bundy Ranch story and, of course, the standoff in Oregon. Now, it says here that those in the movement call themselves patriots, demanding that the federal government adhere to the Constitution and stop what they see as systematic abuse of land rights, gun rights, freedom of speech, and other liberties. Well, I think those are pretty legitimate grievances. When you see the federal government coming down and restricting these things and running roughshod over the people's rights, then the government has strayed from the founders' intent. So these folks clearly see that this is a problem, and they are working to do something, to counter that. Now, the article states that law enforcement officials call them dangerous, delusional, and sometimes violent. Now, again, I don't know of any violent actions that they're speaking of. I mean, there was no violence that broke out at the Bundy Ranch in 2014. There was no violence that broke out at the Oregon standoff. There wasn't. Now, the article says, well, the only violence actually came on the part of the government when they killed Lavoy Finnegan. Okay, so that's where the violence came in. True to form, it was the government that acted in a violent manner. They say that their numbers are growing amid a wave of anger at the government that has been gaining strength since 2008. Now, he writes, this is where he writes, he says that it's been gaining strength since the surge coincided with the election of the first black U.S. president. Now, it's so funny how the Washington Post just somehow thinks that this is all related to having a black president. As far as I know, the patriot community has been in form long before there was ever a black president. In fact, this entire country was founded on rebellious patriots. So as far as I can see, this country is entirely has had a patriot movement ever since its birth. Okay? Now, the second reason they say that this patriot movement is started during the crippling economic recession. Anyway, this article continues. Law enforcement officials and the watchdog groups that track their self-styled patriot groups call them anti-government extremists. Now, this is where the state media, the Washington Post, sides with these groups, these watchdog groups. Okay, now we're going to get into those watchdog groups in a minute. They call these self-styled patriot groups anti-government extremists, militias, armed militants, or even domestic terrorists. Now, these are the names that they brand individuals who want the government to simply follow the Constitution. If you ask the government to do these things and you exercise your Second Amendment rights and you organize freely and you do so with weapons and you train to defend your rights in some capacity, then you are called a domestic extremist or a domestic terrorist even. Now, some opponents of the largely white, this is where it gets interesting, the largely white and rural groups have been made fun of being called the Al-Qaeda and vanilla ISIS. Yes, white rural groups. Mm-hmm. Mark Potok. Oh, Mark Potok, yes. Mark Potok of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which monitors extremism. Again, Mark Potok represents his own brand of government extremism. It's like the shoe on the other foot. I mean, Mark Potok has even listed me on his website. Did you know that? I'm on the Southern Poverty Law Center Meet the Patriots hit list. I'm Patriot number 9, okay? Because I produce documentary films that expose books, laws on the books about government concentration camps, FEMA camps, continuity of government programs in the event of martial law, societal breakdown, natural disasters, pandemics, plagues, civil war, whatever. And that's what my films are about. So because I talk about these programs that are on the books, somehow I'm a deranged conspiracy theorist that requires to be listed and warned about by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Okay? So, in full disclosure, yeah, I'm one of these guys the Southern Poverty Law Center watches out for. Look me up. Just type in Gary Franchi, Southern Poverty Law Center, Gary Franchi, SPLC. And it's not just those movies, those documentary films that I made, Camp FEMA, Enemy of the State, Don't Tread on Me, Rise of the Republic. It's also social media networks that I've developed. I mean, they actually did blog posts because people were using my social media platforms to organize and communicate because they didn't trust the government. Yeah, take a look. Look it all up. Anyway, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which monitors extremism, said there were about 150 such groups in 2008 and about 1,000 now. Yes, Potok and other analysts, including law enforcement officials who track the groups, said their supporters number in the hundreds of thousands, continuing counting people who signal their support in more passive ways, such as following the groups on social media. Yes, so if you simply just follow a group on social media, then you are somehow associated with it, like immediately. You are now on a watch list. Yes, the Southern Poverty Law Center is going to probably have you in their database. And then they give it off to the Homeland Security Department because they are in bed together, right? The article continues at the Facebook page of the Oath Keepers, a group of former members of police forces and the military, has more than 525,000 likes. God bless them. God bless those Oath Keepers, man. I mean, the fact that there's that many people who have sworn oath to protect this country, to uphold the Constitution, from all enemies, foreign and domestic, God bless them. That's what this country is about. But the problem is that our government and our politicians are working for the special interests. They're working for their own personal interests, and they're selling out America. And they'll do so willingly. They will do so willingly, even if it means handing over your rights so that they can earn a couple extra bucks when they retire. That's what it all comes down to. The article continues that President Obama's progressive policies and the tough economic times have inflamed anti-government anger, the same vein of rage into which Donald Trump has tapped during his Republican presidential campaign. That's according to Mark Potok. Mark Pitkovich, who works with the Anti-Defamation League and has monitored extremism for 20 years, also agreed with him on that point. So, look, folks, apparently in this country, if you adhere to the Constitution, if you believe that government should be held accountable, then you are an extremist. Even though our founding fathers demanded that a revolution happen every generation? Every 20 years? That certainly hasn't happened. And government has run unchecked, despite the checks and balances put forth in the Constitution. Some would even argue that the Constitution is a failed document because of it, because we have federalism run amok. And now you have the federal government actually putting out dictates so that men who believe in their mind that they are women can now invade a woman's bathroom, a woman's locker room in your child's schools, in your child's college. The federal government is saying that's okay. Now, the federal government is out of line in that respect. They should not be handing out mandates and dictates and saying that we're going to restrict federal spending or federal handouts because of it. But that's how the federal government gets these schools and universities on the hook. Now, if a local school wants to enforce something like that, they want to have a local policy and they want to work with the local community, the people in that school, to come up with a solution that actually helps the transgendered student who feels discriminated against, then let the local school come up with a solution. It should not be coming down from the federal government. That's it. But that's one microcosm of a problem that shows that the government is coming down and mandating who can go into the bathroom. Do you see how crazy it is? So it's no wonder you have groups that are stepping up, like this family here. They're stepping up and they're saying enough is enough. At some point, they feel that the government is going to collapse. They want to be ready to support their families, to defend their rights whenever that may happen. And that is why the Second Amendment is in place. It's not so you can go hunting. It's to secure the free state. So the individual can have the right to bear arms, to secure the free state with the organized militia. Okay? So, anyway, yes, the Washington Post is clearly coming out, and I mean, the article goes into much greater detail. I just gave you the cliff notes here. You can read it, the link in the description if you haven't seen it already. But again, Washington Post, statist, corporate shill media coming out against average Americans, white Americans who live in the rural America. This is the greatest threat to America. Really? Is it really? I would argue the greatest threat to America is sitting in Washington, D.C. in a nice padded chair. That is the greatest threat to America. What are your thoughts? Weigh in the comment section below. Subscribe for updates. If you like what we're doing at the Next News Network, give us a thumbs up and share this report. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
The Washington Post, a militant atheist publication, just put out an article called Primed to Fight the Government. They claim that a fast-growing U.S. movement armed with guns and the Constitution sees a dire threat to liberty. They don't say. Let's read a few paragraphs verbatim, as it will make our points quite nicely. Quote, deep in the heart of a vast U.S. military training ground surrounded by spent shotgun shells and juniper trees blasted to shreds, the Central Oregon Constitutional Guard was conducting its weekly firearms training. The intent is to be able to work together and defend ourselves if we need to, said Soper, a building contractor who is an emerging leader in a growing national movement rooted in distrust of the federal government, one that increasingly finds itself in armed conflicts with authorities. Those in the movement call themselves patriots, demanding that the federal government adhere to the Constitution and stop what they see as systemic abuse of land rights, gun rights, freedom of speech, and other liberties. Law enforcement officials call them dangerous, delusional, and sometimes violent, end quote. Let's read that last line again, shall we? Law enforcement calls them dangerous, delusional, and sometimes violent. That's a bit like the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? The article then goes on to link the word patriot with domestic terrorism, and that's all they wrote. This, of course, is part of an ongoing agenda, an ongoing campaign by militant atheists to demonize conservatives and patriotic Americans.
She compared Republicans to terrorists at a rally yesterday.
Everyone should feel a little concerned here because these libtards aren't going anywhere anytime soon. In fact, their numbers continue to grow year after year, and if they keep voting themselves into power, the word patriot is going to become a bad word. In fact, saying the word Constitution will become a crime. You think I'm kidding?
Are you some kind of a constitutionalist?
They passed laws like the Patriot Act not to protect patriots, but to target patriots. Right now they're building intelligent Skynet-type systems equipped with Terminators and drone armies that will be fully autonomous and able to kill on their own. We at STFN were able to obtain specifics on this program, and it details how the AI will use social media streams to target victims. Let's be very clear here. They are building a Skynet to kill patriots. It's not a dream, it's not a fantasy, and it's not a science fiction movie. And there will be no happy ending here. The time to protest is now. The time to do something is now. They are only a year or two away from being able to roll Terminators off an assembly line. And by then, it will be too late to protest. Right now, militant atheists are buying time until their Skynet is complete. They'll keep you busy with mindless fluff, with staged attacks, and with boogeymen until their objectives have been accomplished. And once that happens, federal prisons will be turned into concentration camps with a revolving door. They don't need to build FEMA camps, ladies and gentlemen. They don't need to hide them on a base somewhere. They're already out there right in front of you. Once Terminators are out in force, all they have to do is push a button and fake an economic collapse. As panic and riots ensue, Terminators will roll in and mop up. They'll take out the resistance and start hauling people away into slave labor work camps. If you don't think that can happen, just ask yourself why they're feeding you GMOs. Ask yourself why they're mandating toxic vaccines. Why are they fluoridating your water? Ask yourself why they're chemtrailing the population like roaches. Ask yourself why they staged 9/11 to round up the patriots and to send them off into endless wars. Ask yourself those things, and ask yourself why things keep getting worse in our country and not better. And then you can ask yourself, how easy would it be for them to put in place a full-blown tyrannical state? They've been preparing the population for this very thing, locking down neighborhoods over false pretenses. They're acclimating you to shelter in place and to grab your ankles. They are already poisoning undesirable populations throughout our country with the water supply. And you don't think they'll unleash Terminators on the population? You better wake the up and find patriots near you and start meshing together like a network. The Constitution was set up to protect your rights because government never has been and never will be your friend. You have the right to remain silent because government is not your friend. You have a right to privacy because government is not your friend. And you have a right to carry a gun because the government is not your friend. The Constitution doesn't say anything can and will be used against you. It's the government that says that because government is not your friend. The Second Amendment is your last check and balance. And if that goes, every other right will go. They've already blown away the Fourth Amendment. They've already blown away the First Amendment. And if they blow away the Eighth Amendment, well, anything goes. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Investigate 9/11. 9/11 was perpetrated by people within our own government.
America's under threat, and it looks a lot like this.
They will not come into our homes and take away our rights.
A small group of armed right-wing activists have occupied a federal wildlife facility in Oregon in what they call a stand against the tyranny of the federal government.
And this oppressive, tyrannical government
Sounds extreme, but their actions aren't new or isolated. Rather, they're part of a long American tradition. These men are part of the Patriot Movement, which consists of hundreds of right-wing groups and heavily armed militias united by an anti-government ideology. So where did it come from? The Patriot Movement exploded when Obama was elected in 2008. And while several of today's right-wing groups aren't explicitly racist, some of their ideas are rooted in the white supremacist reaction to the civil rights movement. In the 70s and 80s, a group called Posse Comitatus believed a secret group of Jews controlled the country and that black Americans weren't really citizens because the 14th Amendment wasn't legitimate. But some of their other ideas have become common talking points in the Patriot Movement today.
We do know that a lot of these talking points and tactics, like ideas of nullification, that the county or state governments don't have to follow federal laws, that the county sheriff is the highest authority in the county, that right-wingers, radical right-wingers should form militias, that they can interpret the Constitution with more authority than the Supreme Court can, are all ideas that came out of a 1970s white supremacist group called Posse Comitatus.
So when did these right-wing groups gain steam? Right after the 1993 Waco siege, when federal agents attempted to seize illegal guns from a religious group's compound. To patriots, the violent response of the federal officials confirmed their fears of living under a government that was coming for their guns and was willing to kill its own citizens. Over the years, membership of patriot groups died down, but the number of these groups surged after the election of America's first black president. At the beginning of Obama's first term, there were about 150 patriot groups. In 2012, that number ballooned to more than 1,300. One of the most notable and influential, the Tea Party.
I think what the Patriot Movement has been successful at doing is sort of blending and coding or kind of masking over some of these racist ideas and sort of putting them through a funnel of anti-government rhetoric.
Fast forward to 2014 when Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy refused to pay fees for grazing his cattle on federal land. Hundreds of armed militiamen from the Patriot movement showed up to defend him against.
And just so everybody knows, this is not the clip I was talking about where there's a guy who talks about the Jews and some racist things. This is a total propaganda hit piece against people that are considered anti-government. That's what this is. So I just wanted to play this to show what they're saying on the other side and how they're trying to label groups that are trying to stand up against the government. So we'll go back to the clip.
Federal law enforcement. Federal officials had confiscated Bundy's herd, but fearing another Waco, they eventually backed down at gunpoint. Bundy won, and it energized the Patriot movement. And now the occupation of the wildlife refuge in Oregon, led by his sons, has become the latest rallying point for patriots. While a lot of the anger of these Patriot movement groups is fueled by conspiracy theories that range from the government wanting to seize Americans' guns to the implementation of Sharia law, there are also legitimate grievances about federal handling and distribution of resources. And that speaks to a lot of Americans. So, who does the Patriot movement speak for, and can it become the new mainstream?
America is the land of the free and the home of the brave because of the brave.
It's a land where you can make your life what you want of it through any effort that you choose to put in.
America means family is the most important. Freedom, because I love living here.
The freedom to do what you would like to do.
Land of the free and the home of the brave.
So I don't agree with these motherfuckers neither, because it ain't the land of the free, and this is just, you know, even the word patriot, look up the definition, and I do not like the word. I am not a patriot, and the people that are more of nationalists, where they support, you know, the whole support for their country and the military and all of that shit. So this is a really quick clip, so let me just finish this and then we'll be back.
Our government has stepped in and exceeded what its original intention was, and it's infringing on the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of its own citizens.
One of the things wrong with America is the government overreach.
Nobody wants to work hard anymore. Everybody wants to take all the handouts.
Ever-increasing big government blatantly disrespecting the United States Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land.
My goal with our group is to be vocal, to be very loud, to present these issues so people can hear them, understand them clearly, look at both sides of the issues, and make a rational decision.
Passing out constitutions, educating people as much as possible.
We're trying to let people know that we are not the crazy people out there with guns, that we are your neighbors, your friends, your family, your co-workers. We just want to keep America and make it better.
Having our people run for office.
If we're going to affect change, it has to be done at a local level. You're not going to start at the top of the pyramid and work your way down and affect change. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Call in at 702-470-7664 or Skype in. Username Nonpartisan Liberty for All.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All, and we are approaching the end of the show. A lot of different clips that I had played there. I really didn't have time to kind of mix them in, and I wanted to make sure I played it. I didn't play that one where the guy actually fit into the clip that talked about the racist and the conspiracy of Jews and all of that. So I'm not going to get a chance to play that, but whatever, fuck him. I'd rather not give him the airtime. But this whole thing, too, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's not, first of all, that's not recognized. I don't necessarily hold anything against those people, but to me, natural law is the supreme law of the land. Your natural rights that you're born with is the supreme law of the land, not some fucking document that a bunch of people put together and said, you have these rights based on our ability to enforce them via violence in the barrel of a gun. So it's very simple. I say it at the beginning of the show, every show, that you essentially, the rights that you are born with are the rights to do and live your life however you want, as long as you don't interfere with somebody else's rights and freedoms or property. So as long as you don't assault somebody, murder somebody, steal their property, damage their property on purpose. I mean, there's accidents and there's exceptions and stuff like that. But you can do whatever you want to do. And that people somehow accept what the government says as that's how it is, that's how it should be, that all your rights come from the government, but they don't. The only reason why the government is able to do what they do, their authority is based on violence. All governments, this is not just the United States, and this is not just a knock on the United States. The reason why, obviously, I focus on the United States is because I live here, and the United States throughout history has had more freedom than other governments. It no longer does, but it has. So that's why I focus on the U.S. government. If it was, as far as other governments go, I feel the exact same way about those as well. And they do the same thing to their people. Well, it's not their people, but to the people that live in that geographical area. I only got about 3 minutes left. I wanted to just mention this article that in Paris, families are suing Facebook, Google, and Twitter and saying that they're responsible for the Paris attacks because they let ISIS spread extremist propaganda and recruit on their social networks. This is one of the most ridiculous fucking things I've seen. This is like the whole gun thing where they were able to sue gun manufacturers because somebody bought a gun and then killed somebody with it. What people do with that information and what people do with, what are you going to sue paper? If I wrote a note in paper and said, or the terrorist wrote a note in paper and gave it to somebody else and said to do something, are you going to sue the fucking paper manufacturer? It's insane. It's the culture that keeps getting worse, that nobody's responsible for their own actions. Just like what happened in Orlando, they look at it as, well, how can we stop this? Who's responsible? Oh, it's guns. It's hate. It's this. It's that. It's Islam. It's a fucking guy who's a lunatic is who it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. And if you want to live in a free country, which most people actually don't, they'd rather, it seems like, I don't know, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of people would rather say, hey, let's give away all these freedoms just to make sure that, the 0.001% of the time that mass shootings happen, they won't happen. Well, but they might still happen, but we might decrease it a little, which obviously, look at how many rights they violated. It's like the drug war. They can't get it through their fucking head that it doesn't work, what they're doing, that you cannot stop it. So what do? Well, you could have more security. You could have more people with guns themselves. Obviously, again, somebody in there had a gun. I don't know what the fuck went on still, but there was a shootout with a cop outside. But if somebody in the club had a gun, they could have possibly shot him. But there's things like that you can do, is instead of trying to ban things, you do the opposite and you let things run free. And you see in the end, initially it might not give you the ultimate expected result, but eventually it will. It will give you a positive result where, if you look at drugs and how in other countries and places where they've legalized them and the statistics and how they're all positive, same type of thing, but as you keep trying to ban things, the more you try to stop people and try to ban things and things like that, the more that it's going to happen. So that's all the time we have for tonight. I really appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be back tomorrow. So I hope that you tune in then. So thanks a lot, everybody. Check us out again, nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, and I will be posting that article in the next few minutes. Part 4 of the series on the war on drugs. Thanks, everybody.
If you're white, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. We will defend these police officers.
Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. The nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
We don't get to pick the laws. We enforce them. But at the end of the day, each and every member is to go home safe. Sometimes the use of force is necessary. You need to comply with the police officer the way the system was meant to be. Comply with the orders of police officers. Resisting arrest is a real and dangerous crime.
Nonpartisan Liberty for All. I'm your host, Dave Bourne, and it is June 15th, 2016, and we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you for tuning in to Nonpartisan Liberty for All. We're on weeknights Tuesday through Thursday at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern, and you can listen on Spreaker.com and nonpartisanlibertyforall.com and to the archives immediately following the show on Spreaker, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud, as well as the next day on Stitcher. On Nonpartisan Liberty for All, we promote the ideas of true freedom and liberty and self-ownership, meaning being able to do whatever you want as long as you respect the freedom of others and don't directly interfere with their freedom, exposing government for what it is, a mafia based on extortion that rules without consent by threat of force and of violence. And we are, of course, happy to hear from you. You can reach us via phone. Phone number is 702-470-7664. That's 702-470-7664. Or you can contact us via Skype. Skype username Nonpartisan Liberty for All. Just send a contact request with your name and what you want to talk about. And check us out at nonpartisanlibertyforall.com, which links to our Facebook and social media info, as well as other information, including articles, blogs, pictures, and things like that. I will be posting the fourth part of our series on the legalization of drugs and why they should be treated as they were prior to the 1920s after the show. So you can go check that out. And we also have any of the information you missed, the phone number, the Skype username is all there as well. So you can, if you forget that information, you can always go to nonpartisanlibertyforall.com to get all of that contact information, including the email address if you want to send us an email. So yesterday I talked mostly the whole show about what happened in Orlando. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to spend a few at, I think it was just background checks, and that didn't pass. And that was when the Democrats held the Senate as well, and it still didn't pass. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure they're going to be doing a lot of things that we're not going to be told about. It's just between the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, they're going to be doing shit that we don't know about, violating our rights even more. So, but I don't know. It's just going to continue. Essentially, the level of freedom that you have, which isn't much anymore, period, is going to continue to disintegrate until government totally controls your life. And that's what's going to happen. It's inevitable. It's where everything is leading. And they want to get the guns, of course, first, because it's a lot easier to take over when no one's armed. So, you know, I was talking yesterday about drawing lines, and that's definitely where I draw a line. You know, as Charlton Heston said, you'll be prying my gun out of my cold, dead hands. Anyway, that is not why we are here today. We have two main stories that I wanted to talk about. One very disturbing that actually originally happened in March, but it had come up again, and it almost seems like, according to the witness, it was an execution. So there in Arizona, and I think there's a lot of them, there's an Indian reservation, because I dated a couple girls that were Native Americans, and they were between New Mexico and Arizona, meaning they lived in, I think they were born in Arizona, and they lived on a reservation. They're Navajos. And then they lived in New Mexico, and I think they lived on the reservation there. I believe this woman was a Navajo as well. But she was 27 years old, a mother, had a 9-year-old. Now, she had some issues. Her name was Loreal. It's hard to pronounce her last name. Tsingine. Now, this girl was 5 feet, 100 pounds. Now, keep that in mind, and I'll bring it up again because it makes a lot of difference in this story. And in about the past year, she had some issues. What it sounds like is that she was drinking too much. I guess she could have been doing other stuff, but it sounds like she had a few minutes on what they're already talking about doing. And of course, this has been, 4 days? The third business day. They're already talking about making changes to gun control I guess that wouldn't be proper English, that they're already talking about making changes, writing new gun bills or gun legislation. You had a congressman that came out and said, oh, we need to have updates to the Second Amendment like we do the First, and that this is all about guns, not about terrorism or hate crimes or anything like that, which is nice. Of course, the candidates for president have what they plan to do. Clinton talked about a task force on lone wolf terrorism. Trump, even before this happened, made various speeches on about more security. You know, who cares about that First Amendment was one of the things that he had said. More spying, less rights. Essentially, that's where I don't understand why anyone would support Trump, because everything he has said has been totally anti-freedom. Of course, everything's rigged anyway, so what does it really matter? But all of the statements that he has made nothing, you know, maybe he made a statement here or there, but for the majority of his statements, at least during the primaries or before everybody left and during the debates and all of the things he had said there, because that's when I paid attention in his town halls and during the debates, those were the type of things he was saying. So he is also talking about, you know, this terrorist watch list and how you can be on the terrorist watch list and get a gun. Yeah, because there's no due process. You could put anybody. And that includes, see, what people aren't thinking about is they're just thinking, oh, just Muslim terrorists would be on there. No, they're going to put people, they could put me on there for doing a show. Like the show I do. I could be on there. I seriously doubt it because my show's so small. But if I got bigger, I could end up on a terrorist watch list and not be able to get another gun. So this whole thing, when it comes down to it, and I said this yesterday, everybody's looking for what do we do? What do we do? How do we stop these lone wolf terrorists? The bottom line is you can't. You cannot live in a free country, which we don't anyway, so what's the fucking difference? But you cannot live in a free society and stop people from doing random acts of anything. Violence, robbery, murder. You just can't. They want pre-crime is what they want. And to have something like that, you have to totally violate people's rights, which they're already doing already, but that's not good enough. So they're already on top of this. And as I said yesterday, this is a wet dream for politicians because, look, it gives them another example to use, to exploit, and to go after guns, terrorists, and attacks on minorities. Or, yeah, because gay people would be a minority. It's not a race, but it's still a minority. And not that I have anything against gay people or anything like that, because I don't. It just happened to be gay people that he went after. But it doesn't represent the majority of people's attitudes towards gay people at all, because most people don't give a shit, meaning that, you know, if somebody's gay, who cares? That's, you know, that's their business. So that's really all I wanted to say about it. They're trying to fast track the 1 million Syrian refugees that they're letting into the country. I personally, I don't like the fact about getting permission from the government to come into a country. However, I can see people's points on this, on letting 1 million Syrian fucking refugees into the country and letting more and more Muslim refugees into the country and trying to actually change the culture to an extent. And if it's between changing gun laws and letting in 1 million refugees, I'd rather keep the gun laws the way they are and not let in the refugees. I had to think about the order of that. So, I mean, in an ideal world, I think you should be able to travel wherever the fuck you want. And who owns, if it's public land, you should be able to go wherever you want. But I understand something like this where they're saying, you know, not only are they letting them in, but they're paying for it, and that's an issue. So you don't pay to let people into the country, as far as I'm concerned, nor do you give them welfare. If people can come and go to get wherever they're trying to get or go where they want to go, that's totally on them. But giving them money and helping them to get somewhere, that's a whole nother story. So that's really all I got to say about that as of right now. We'll see what happens with the gun laws and if anything changes, because just because some idiot congressman or a few idiot congressmen come out and say some shit, it didn't happen last time when they tried to just pass a bill that had some issues with alcohol in the past year. I don't know. Maybe some things have happened. She's only 27. It's not like she's, you know, which to people that are younger than 27 is, oh, that's old. But 27 is really young. So, you know, I don't know what she was going through, but she, you know, I don't know, maybe she broke up with her boyfriend or something. She had a couple incidences. On the day in question, she reportedly went into, I believe it was like some kind of convenience store or something like that, and just put shit in her purse, but it made it obvious, and I guess she just started eating a hot dog or something. I mean, it sounded like she was really fucked up, and I guess she was there earlier in the day, and she grabbed some beer, and so they called the police, which that's fine. Although it's scary anytime you call the police in any situation, because a lot of times people end up dead, and that's what happened in this story. So I want to play this witness's account of what happened, because the police claim she was armed with scissors. Now, again, 2 cops, 5 feet tall, 100-pound woman who was drunk, supposedly armed with scissors. Everything I read and looked at, there's no proof that she actually even had scissors. And if she had scissors, you know, there's a lot of variations of scissors. I would think if she had scissors, she had small little scissors that you use like to something a woman would use scissors for, cut your eyebrows or something. I don't know. Something to that effect. Not like a big fucking thing, scissors that are like a foot long or something like that. But here is a witness that was actually there who witnessed the police, who, through what I got from him, was that they had her on the ground and they were handcuffing her, and another cop came over and just shot her 5 times. So what it sounded like to me is that she was on the ground being handcuffed, was just shot 5 times by this officer who has been in trouble a lot. I have his name somewhere. This officer, I think it's Shipley. So he had been in trouble, and I have some reports a bunch of times.